Hi, folks. It's me, Lillian Bogo of the Shine Out Loud Show. Now, I am doing a special interview with the multi-talented, multi-diverse CEO, founder, editor, director, author. I'm talking about the CBE recipient, Frances Mensah Williams. So join me and welcome Frances. Hi, Frances.
Hello. Hi. Great to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad to have you. Now, we are remote and having this conversation. And
hmm
in the wake of International Women's Day, I wanted to have you as a special guest on the show to talk about the work that you do, the contribution that you've made, not just to women, but to the diaspora community
hmm
generally. So let's start from the very beginning. Now, most people
Okay.
know that you are a managing editor of the ReConnect Africa magazine, which is an online careers and business portal for global professionals of African origins. You're an
Yep.
author.
hmm
You also are the founder and CEO of Interims for Development.
hmm
When we look at everything on your title, when we say HR professional, CEO,
hmm
all of that, when we take all of that away, who is Frances Mensah Williams?
Wow. There's a question I haven't had before. In my head, everything always starts from the closest to me. So who am I?
Right.
First of all, I'm a mother.
Okay.
I'm a mother of two great girls. Secondly, I'm a citizen both of Africa and of the UK where I live and work.
Okay.
And I think that for me, that means as a citizen of Ghana and a citizen of Africa, I have a duty and a responsibility to offer support, to offer my skills, to offer my time. And I do exactly the same in the UK where I live.
Okay.
Yeah. So that those are kind of where I would say the two things, the two sort of key parts of the identity. And that citizenship throws out all these other
Questions.
ways in
Mm.
which the citizenship is demonstrated. So whether it's through, skills programs, whether
Hmm.
it's through writing about the issues that confront and that we are dealing with as challenges, whether it's through coaching people one-to-one, whether it's to talking to large groups, it's how it manifests.
Okay. So in that and that's a core part because there is a large part of how you layer your identity based on citizenship. And we'll talk about your TEDx talk that you did entitled Home, where it was search more about the searching for home.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that when how you layer that level of identity, especially because you have two layered identities.
hmm
But we'll come to that. So you were working here in the UK. You decided you were going to get up and move back to Ghana.
Uh-huh.
What was the pivotal factor for your move back to Ghana?
So you see, this is where I could get all like, oh, I needed to go back and do things and do my part and give back. Look, I was seeing this guy. The guy said, let's go to Ghana. This was intense love.
Oh
So,
wow.
yeah. And also, you know what? I'd gone through so much stuff. I was working in human resources here in the UK. I was working in the city. We'd gone through
Mm.
major ups and downs. I worked for an infamous company that just went out of business. And
I won't ask you to name names. That's okay.
nah, I'm gonna try not to. But so when a hot guy is telling you, you know what, let's go to Ghana, fun times, beaches, barbecues, let's chill out. And it's like, yeah, okay, that could work. That could work. But actually I was pretty practical too. Like I kind of went ahead, I did a recce, I got a job
Hmm.
sorted out, then I came back and then we sort of went back together.
Okay. So that was I love the fact that you're honest about that because there's that whole, oh yeah, I went for bigger reasons. I went to make my country better. Like, no, there was a man involved.
That was definitely not involved. No, but you know what? I also, and I really applaud a lot of people who get up and go back on their own to a country that is historically theirs, culturally theirs, but which they don't know. And they don't
Hmm.
do it with the kind of hand holding that I literally had for me. So it was a lot easier to go back with a guy who had grown up there, who knew people. I mean, I had got friends, I had got a bit of a network anyway,
Hmm.
because my older brothers had gone to school in Ghana and my parents had always kept us connected. So we went back
Right.
pretty regularly. But just having that partner who knew the place well and was able to sort of really help me adjust,
Hmm.
was invaluable.
Okay. So, and and that's the thing. There are more and more people doing that. I mean, Ghana launched last year the Year of Return,
Yeah.
and I think actually let's go to that question because Ghana launched that Year of Return. And do you predict more professionals and entrepreneurs are going to be from the diaspora are going to be moving back? Because there seems to be this call from the
Yeah.
continent to have us back.
Yeah, I mean, right now everything's so crazy, it's hard to predict. But you know what? I've kind of seen over the last couple of decades, if you like, there's been this sort of rise and fall and rise and fall. There was a
Hmm.
time when we were all like crazy with the Africa Rising narrative.
Hmm.
The growth rates were massive around the continent. When I came back from 5.5 years in Ghana, when we came back as a family, and
Hmm.
the questions I kept getting asked was, how do I do the same thing you did? And at the time, it was both older people who were kind of midway through their careers and looking at how do I transition that career back. It was
Hmm.
some people whose parents were getting older and they were starting to worry about being away from them. But
Hmm.
there were also young kids, kids in their 20s, late teens, graduated, were like, we're not getting very far here in the UK. How do we go back? So I saw a lot of that positivity.
Right.
Um, Go forward a few years, it all started to get a lot calmer and quieter. The companies were not coming out recruiting the way they had in the beginning.
Okay.
They were getting much pickier now. They were saying, well, yeah, we want people, but they need to come on local packages. Um, and they were only looking for specialist roles because they were starting to build up the local talent more.
Right.
But then there was a bit of a shift, and then suddenly there was this big shift towards entrepreneurship. Suddenly everybody wanted to start a business. It wasn't about careers anymore, it was about starting a business. And then there was a lot of money going around for organizations to help people start businesses. So again, that drove a different trend as well. And I
Yeah.
think now it's kind of technology has also allowed people to interact with being in Africa in inverted commas differently. So there are people who are doing stuff that are maybe on tech platforms, um, where they don't actually need to be there all the time.
Yeah.
But there's a whole kind of raft of different types of industries, businesses, ways of working, mentorship programs, all kinds of things which technology has really enabled. So I think I've just seen a massive shift. I mean, I wrote a book called I Want to Work in Africa because everyone kept asking me that question. So I was like, okay, let me just put it all together in a book.
Yeah.
Um, and it was like really popular. And then, as I said, it became all about starting a business. And now everybody's asking for it again because everyone's now thinking, I need to
There's
do
a shift
something
in
different.
trends.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll even talk about that a bit more. So we know what drove this drive for professionalism, drive for getting the talent back in. Then my question is, when we look at going back, what do we as individuals need to know about working in Africa? And we're making out like Africa is one
Yeah.
monolith,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but what is it like to act? What do we need to know when we're going back to places we may have, like you said, our historical connections, but no actual connections
Mhm.
any longer? What are the first key things that we need?
And I think, you made the first point right there. So we use the word Africa as a shorthand for like 54 countries. So
Yeah.
the first thing we need to know, and I sometimes get people saying, I want to work in Africa, and I'm going, where? And they go, well, I don't mind. And I'm like, well, okay. So you want to work in Denmark, Spain, Italy, Germany, you don't mind, you know, right? So every country is different.
Yeah.
Every country will have different rules. Every country may not actually even let you work there because if you don't have a passport or nationality or the right to nationality, you may have to get in line and be treated like an expat and have to find some company to sponsor you.
Hmm.
So first off, you have to kind of know where you want to go. I mean,
Hmm.
that's probably a rule of life in general, but
Yeah.
you have to know where you want to go. And then you got to do your research. You got to ask those basic questions. I remember I had really enthusiastic guy who called me up and he said, look, I want to start this business up. And I'm like, yeah, tell me about it. And he said, oh, it's all about, it's going to be in Mauritius, and it's going to be about finding opportunities for grads who couldn't get a job here to
Hmm.
get some work in Mauritius. And I said, okay, have you been to Mauritius before? He said, no. I said, do you know what Mauritius needs right now in terms of maybe like recruitment? And he said, no. I said, have you done any recruitment before? He says, well, not really, but so it's like, and he
Like,
was such a sweet guy.
how were you?
Yeah. And this is the thing, sometimes our enthusiasm is so great, our motivation is so fired that we kind of forget the basics, because we just want to get out there and do. And I'm talking especially to the young ones. We want to get out there and do, and we don't really stop and think about the how.
Mm,
So I'm saying, first of all, you got to think about the how, right? So where do you want to go? Where do you want to go? Why do you want to go?
yeah.
Understand your motivation, because if you don't know why you're motivated to be there, when things get tough, and they will, you will run because you don't know why you were there, right? So
Exactly.
you got to know, why do you want to go? What is it you're trying to do? What do you want to achieve?
Mm,
It might just be a short-term thing. Maybe you want to work there for a couple of years, build up your CV, build up your experience, come back. Maybe you want to move back forever. Maybe you're just going to give it a try. All those reasons give you a different strategy. So if
mhm,
you don't know what the reason is, you can't develop a strategy. If you know you just want to go and build on your experience for a couple of years, great. What is it you want to build on? What skill sets do you want to do? So therefore, what kind of role do you need to think about getting?
mhm.
What kind of industry do you want to work in? What kind of company size is going to make sense for you based on what you're out there to do?
Okay.
So that's the starting point. It's those basics that sometimes people just literally hop, skip, and jump over and sort of get to the end goal. Yeah,
But people, like you said, the motivation is abound. They're like, yay, I want to do this. This is going to be my next step. This is where I'm going. And so you're like, I'll figure the steps. In personal development, they're like, listen, build a plane as you're flying, and that kind of message. And as you fall, you learn to fly. And I'm like, yeah, sometimes you're gonna crash land hard if you don't have some kind of structure in place.
yeah. And the thing is, with our African countries and societies, that structure is not as straightforward as you find, in the West. And so, here you can much more easily just jump on a recruitment website and find a role and apply. And, if you've got the right kind of CV and application, you'll
Hmm.
get an interview, and things kind of move in that smoothness. So, back home in our societies, it's much more people, much more connection based.
Yes.
And yes, of course, we have that here too. We call it networking here. We call it nepotism in Africa, right? So, um,
Oh no, it's called
right?
nepotism here. It's just at the level that it's called nepotism, we don't normally see.
See? So, so we got to network ourselves back home as well, right? Because the same thing I get here with people going, oh, I don't know anyone, I don't have a
Mhm.
network. Listen, if you got anyone you speak to who responds to you, you have a network.
Yeah,
So you just start with who you know, because who you know knows people too, and you
yeah,
don't know who everybody who you know knows. So you got to
exactly.
just really start realizing you have access to a huge network, but you have to leverage that. And that means using your connections, your family, your aunties, your uncles, your parents, your siblings, whoever has got any connection with anything to do with that, and say, this is what I'm trying to do. And the key to the networking is clarity. Sometimes we use our network like we're just having that bouncing off discussion. I'm
Mm.
thinking about this. I kind of thought about that. Other people have mentioned this. That's not helping someone go forward and say, I know this
How can I
person
help you? Yeah.
is great at XYZ, right? So if you're in marketing and you're thinking about going to Ghana and you're looking for a marketing job, it's not about saying, oh, I've been in marketing for a while, I want to go to Ghana, I'm really open to stuff, right? That's going to help nobody.
Nobody.
So you really need to get that positioning clear, right? So I'm a great digital marketer. I've been working with organizations, helping them look at how to market their products in the digital space. I'm looking for a company in Ghana where I can take these skills and where I can really move some of their maybe print marketing or online marketing into the digital space and make a huge difference for them that way. right? Now that
Yeah.
sounds to me a lot easier for me to sell you.
Exactly. So you've given them some kind of clarity and something to pitch to somebody else.
Precisely.
Okay.
Give them the vocabulary so that they can go say what you want them to say, rather than kind of just throwing word ideas out and letting them go and interpret that the way they think they heard it.
And then you meet people who have this different vision. You're like, that's
No, I didn't come to work in the market. I came to be a marketeer. Difference.
Okay, so we're talking about the work that you're doing, and because of the work that you have been doing, you've been recently awarded a CBE by the Queen herself.
That is true.
How did that happen?
Wow. Yeah, I'm still kind of trying to process that, and anyone who follows me on social media will see that I have pretty much done and said nothing about it. I picked it up 2 weeks ago. Actually, it was probably 10 days ago, because I'm still processing. So how it happened, I got a letter in November last year to say I have been nominated for this award, and before they kind of go any further with this, they want to understand whether I would accept it or not.
Okay.
So, I know there are people who have their views and their opinions on whether they're going to accept such things or not. I have a father who would have slapped me if I said no, so that wasn't even an issue.
You're like, please, trust me, I can't refuse if I wanted to, because
Yeah, and you know what? For me, the nomination was for the work I have done with Africans in the UK and Africans in Africa. So for me, it was about the work. It was about the people that have worked with me for almost 2 decades, that have gone on projects, that have done so many amazing, incredible things. And for me, it was a recognition of all of that. So it wasn't even an issue. So I said, yeah. And then it pretty much went quiet. And I was busy working on my just released novel. I had a ton of stuff going on. And I really didn't think very much more about it, to be perfectly honest, because you didn't hear anything more. That was it. That was the end of it. And then, fast forward December, late December, I saw something in the papers about the New Year's honors list is coming out in the next day or two, and they put it online. And I was like, oh, okay. So I was watching TV with my daughter, and I suddenly remembered. And I said to her, you know what, give me a minute. Let me go check something on the computer. And she's like, we're trying to watch this movie. And I said, yeah, I know. Just give me a minute. And so I go and I look up the New Year's website, honors list website, and there it was.
Oh, wow.
And there it was. And I was like, wow. So immediately it was like, okay, family meeting, right? Because I hadn't said anything to anybody, right? I hadn't said a thing to anyone. So it was like family meeting. So everyone comes rushing through. My daughter's like, who died? Who died? I'm like, no, it's okay. It's good. It's good news. So yeah, that was that. And then you get another piece of communication congratulating you with setting out some more detail, the reasons. And then we went to pick it up at Buckingham Palace on the 12th of March.
Okay.
So that was amazing. Prince Charles, the Prince of Wales, gave it to me, and I was in great company. My goodness, Floella Benjamin was receiving a damehood,
Yes,
so she
saw that.
She was with me in that same ceremony, and yeah, it was amazing. Met some interesting people, and the palace is amazing. So yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so we prefaced this a bit. So we talked about your TED Talk, Where is Home? And you talk about being able to adapt and feeling at home. Yeah. So first question is, what made you pick that topic for your TED Talk?
The thing with TED is that unlike a lot of the work I do, which is training people about something or coaching people about something, TED is really personal. Right. And so if you sign up to do TED, you've got to be ready to open up. In discussion, when they invited me to do the talk, in discussion around the sort of topics, I guess for me, everything I do is around this bicultural life I lead. Okay. So 1 foot in the UK, 1 foot in Ghana. What does that really mean? I mean, I was born in Ghana, but I spent most of my life outside it. I went back as an adult, lived there for a few years, and reintegrated again, and then came out again. And so I think when I think about the people that I speak to, the diasporan professionals I work with, I coach, there's always this question of identity and where do you feel at home, and what is home when you have this dual cultural you know persona. Because I can be with Ghanaians in Ghana, and I can be that person, and I can be in the UK with everybody else, and I can be that person, and they're all part of me, and they're all authentically part of me. I'm not pretending in either of those two spaces. However, to be comfortable in both those spaces is not necessarily straightforward. And I've spoken to so many people who struggled when they tried to go back to whichever country they were from. They felt alien, they felt unwelcome, they felt teased, they felt laughed at, they felt belittled. It's not true for everybody, but enough people feel that I figured it was a thing. It was worth considering. I was fortunate. I had grown up with parents who were very clear that, and because we lived in so many different countries as a kid, that you are Ghanaian. Wherever you live, you are a citizen of where you live, but you're also Ghanaian. So we spoke the language at home. We spoke Tree at home. I still do. And so going back, I had brothers who had been in school there, and I had that network. So it was not as difficult in many respects. However, the internal dialogue that says, do I belong here, remained the same as perhaps many people who didn't even have the advantage I had of language. And things travel. Your accent travels, right? We were laughing before because I thought you were in the States, right? Your accent travels. And I remember there was one time I was speaking to someone, and they said something like, Queen Elizabeth. This was in Accra, right? And I was like, okay, I'm taking it. That's a good thing. Or at least it's not an insult, shall we say. But you are aware of your differences. You get in a cab and they'll say, oh, are you an African American? And you're like, then have to resort to a bit of local lingo to, make sure they know you're not. Because your clothes are different, and the way you speak is different, and the way you are curious is also different. And this is what I found when I started working in Ghana, was that I had this very kind of breezy attitude to things. And my first job was with the Bank of Ghana, which was like the most traditional, conventional central bank location you could put to, and I'd come from working in this very free and easy UK company where everyone called the MD by his first name, and you ran around and you did your own photocopying and stuff. And now I was getting people coming up and saying, Madam Manager, please, you can't go and do the photocopying. You have to put it in the out tray. There is someone whose job it is to go do the photocopying. So you then have to realize that, okay, so I come to these accommodations. Yeah, there's a system. So I had to learn the system. Things like only the head of the department had the computer that you could just jump on, right? So I would just make little accommodations like, okay, that's fine, but let's just agree that if the stuff hasn't come out of my out tray in an hour, I can go photocopy and no one's going to bother me about that, right? But all those little things that make you aware that, you come with a different perspective. It's not better, it's not worse, it's just different. So if you're going to learn to fit in, you're the one that's got the different perspective. So you have to fit into the existing perspective. And I think this is where a lot of people struggle, is that they want to bring this idea of, I'm coming to change things. Well, people need to kind of want to change before you can change them. And if they're fine as they are, you're not going to be having the problem, right? They're fine.
Your world is happy. You're just going to hit your head on a brick wall.
So for me, the TED Talk was really about exploring what it took for me to make that internal transition, to move from being, a kind of a visitor almost to this country of mine, to being a citizen of this country of mine. And the key thing was the responsibilities that come onto you as a citizen, for you to do the work, right?
Right.
The work is not, you don't arrive and expect to find the work has been done for you. You have to do the work.
Okay.
So I don't know my way around anywhere. I have the worst sense of direction in the world. And I remember my husband gave me this, map of KLM map of Accra, and it was just hilarious. Yeah, it was not fun. So I had to start asking people, how do I get to this place? And the starting point was like, I knew the way from home to work and back. So everything was like, okay, so you leave the house like you're going to work. And when you get to this bit, you're going to make a left, you're going to do that. But then things started coming up like, and when you get to Mr. So-and-so's house, you're going to do a right there. I'm like, well, who is, first of all, Mr. So-and-so? And second of all, how am I supposed to know where he lives, right? And then, okay, that blue kiosk, when you get there, turn left. What if that blue kiosk got painted pink, right? So you have to get into the spirit of living there. You have to change your map, literally and metaphorically. You have to change your vocabulary, literally and metaphorically. You have to change how you navigate, literally and metaphorically, so that you start to be within the society, you start to be part of the people. And for me, it meant meeting people where they are and not expecting people to come meet me where I am.
Right. Okay. And that's actually quite important, because there's something about when you say there's a bubble almost people take with them and they stay in that bubble, and then they go, but I'm living in this bubble, the world should accommodate my bubble.
Right. Doesn't do that.
And I have friends who've moved to the UK from Nigeria, and they haven't left the bubble. And there's an expectation of how the world should treat them based on their bubble. And I remember even meeting someone here who says, when I define myself as British Nigerian, they're like, oh, you can't say that. I'm like, but why? I am British because of my birth. I am Nigerian because of my parentage. So why can I not claim both? Oh, but you're Nigerian. I go, I'm not. I'm not solely Nigerian, because I have a layered identity. This is my home. This is where I was born. This is where my family is. So, and I think there's that conversation about even how we view ourselves in the diaspora and on the continent, that whole, before we even look at even joining that conversation of let's work somewhere else.
For sure. And I know we're going to talk about it, but my new novel, Imperfect Arrangements, it's about three women, three best friends. And one of those women, Teresa, has returned to, well, not even returned, has gone to Ghana. And when the story starts, she's been in Ghana for about 5 months. And she came with her husband, and she came with a very clear idea of what she thinks this is going to be all about, right? And that accommodation, in terms of, for them, it's more about how their relationship gets impacted by this transition, as much as her desire, because she's coming to start a business. She wants to do that. She's tired of having had the ceiling oppressing her in where she was working in the UK, and that was for her big motivation to come to Ghana, was to be with her two best friends, but also to start this business that she knows she's capable of doing. But they came with this idea that their relationship worked in the bubble they were in, and it was, of course, going to continue working where they were coming to.
The layered conversation of in-laws and family and...
Oh boy, it's all in there. It's all in there.
Frances, I am so upset that you don't have a webcam, because I wanted to see the reactions, because I read the synopsis of the book. I was like,
yeah. Oh, I have to tell you, I love this story. And I know sometimes it sounds a bit weird for someone to say that, especially if they wrote it, but I really do. I think the characters, I just love the girls and the guys. And unusually, this book also looks at it from the eyes of the three men. So it's basically chapters, and the whole thing takes place over a period of 1 year.
Right.
And every 3 months we have a set of chapters from everybody, the 6 characters. It's mainly the women, but the men have their little chapters too, because I really wanted to explore, what was he thinking?
So basically giving him his voice in that narrative.
His voice. This is not about creating a caricature of men or some kind of, blame game about guys. It's really trying to understand as people, what drives us, what motivates us to do what we do, and how do we make sense to ourselves of the things we're doing. So yeah.
I'm going to explore the parts of you as an author, and I have some real interesting questions, but I have a couple of more questions.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, let's just go with the author stuff. Let's talk about you being an author. And you talk about what drives you to write is that you worry that there's not enough writers telling the stories of people that look like you and I.
Mm-hmm.
And my question is, with more women authors of color emerging, is there still room for more stories, or have we reached the ever elusive representation that we're looking for?
Nowhere close. Nowhere close. Oh my gosh. There is so much space there, it's crazy. I mean, when you walk into a library in the UK and you see all those books on all the walls around you,
Mm-hmm.
a minuscule fraction of those were written by Black people or Asian people or people from Latin America or people from wherever. Most of them are not. And
Yeah.
so we have a lot of catching up to do. There's a lot of bookshelves that need filling. And, it needs to get to that stage where no one's asking about the color question anymore, because we're beyond that. That's a given now. Now it's, what kind of stories are you telling as a person of color? Not, and in fact, I don't even want my stories necessarily to be about that. So my next book that's coming out, Corona permitting, is set in London, and it really has got nothing to do with race. In fact, it's got more to do with kind of class and social status.
If we're allowed out. So if you may have to change the book if we're no longer allowed out and we all have to live indoors like moles.
Yeah, we'll just have to make it an ebook only and just get that out there. But my plan was to have that out in the summer. I'm kind of like starting to slowly learn that you make plans and God's laughing. So I'm trying not to get too ahead of myself with that one. But yeah, I mean, we have a lot of space. We have a lot of space for people to tell stories. Irrespective of our color, background, gender, whatever, everyone has stories. So anyone who feels that they're able to put that discipline into writing a book and put that time into crafting and learning to really make that craft so that they can tell those stories well, go for it. We need it.
Awesome. And there is room for it, but there's almost the fear now is that when there are more women of color writing, and there's now seems to be this expectation that the story is almost same story, different players.
Yeah.
How do we prevent going down the road of what Chimamanda would call the single story?
And that is what I battle against. The kind of books that I write, it's so funny. Sometimes people describe them in so many different ways. I get chick lit, I get women's commercial fiction, I get rom-com, and I probably, if I had to choose, would probably say romantic comedies, because that's kind of closest to the space. I mean, women's fiction, commercial fiction can mean anything, I guess.
Yeah.
I talk about issues that are deep issues to do with identity, to do with belonging, to do with relationships, not just with other people, but relationships with ourselves, to do with how we grow as women. My protagonists are all women, except for this book where we also get a view to the men. And so for me, it's about growth and progress, but I put that so relationships are the vehicle, if you like, in which people discover relationships with other people, are the vehicle in which my women discover their own relationships with themselves.
Right.
And so if it's easier to transpose that growth against the relationship, then, we all relate to relationships. So that's something that makes it relatable. I write very visually, so with a lot of dialogue. So it's almost like watching a movie, I've been told many times. And for me, I actually write because I see the movie in my head and I hear the dialogue and I'm just kind of, recording it. And so it's very visual, and I'm really hoping someone's going to pick this up for TV or movie or whatever, because it's really, I think, about just letting everyday people tell everyday stories. So it's not about the boxes they try and sometimes push women of color writers into, where you're supposed to only write about race, because isn't that surely the only thing that preoccupies you?
You
Well,
know,
guess
being
what?
angry and race, you know,
Yeah.
anger
Yeah.
and race. That's all we know.
But you see, that's why with this one, I said, okay, so if I put the story in Ghana, race is out of the issue, right? Because everyone there is pretty much looking the same as each other. So we don't have a
Yes.
race issue. So now we have a problem. What's our problem? We have a relationships issue. We have a personal growth issue. We have a challenge with how we thought our relationship or our marriage was. We have a challenge with how do we deal with being disappointed with the person that we have chosen, or with ourselves for the way we're
Mm-hmm.
reacting to the person we have chosen when they're going through hard times. You know, how do we deal with family members who feel they have a right to tell you what to do and how to be? How do we deal with a boss that is maybe not giving you what you need? How do you deal with friends who you love dearly but can drive you crazy?
Mm.
And you need to be the anchor that brings them down to earth and be real for them. That's what this was about, because we didn't have to talk about race anymore.
Mm. And that's you know, I love that, because you took out, so the main issue that they say is a single story, you've taken it out, and now you have a story that is so multidimensional and so level that anybody can relate to it.
Yeah.
Mm. Okay, so going back to your first book, what was the final driving force that said, okay, the first draft has to come out?
You know, I wrote the first draft of my first novel, From Pasta to Pigfoot. I wrote that when I was living in Ghana,
Right.
and it was actually motivated by the fact that, having returned and going through this integration process, some of the things I was encountering just struck me as funny. I mean, it was like, you know, and I was thinking, okay, you've had a chance to be back and forth in Ghana a lot. But imagine if you come from the UK and this was your first introduction to this country and these things are happening. How are you going to deal with it? You know, whether it's the guys rushing you because it's like fresh meat, right? from having to look hard and hard and hard to find that fine black man in London, suddenly they're all coming at you like,
You're like, okay, take a queue up. There's a queuing system.
right? How do you deal with the people who are not happy when the men are coming chasing after you? How do you deal with this feeling of, I want to be accepted? Everyone looks like me. Why do I still not feel like I'm home, right? All those things we talked about before.
Yeah.
So the character of Faye came in my mind at the time, and I could just. And I was then asking, well, what would have brought somebody like Faye to Ghana? You know, she'd grown up in London. She had no real reason to come to Ghana. What could it have been? And then it was sort of, well, what are the things that often make people feel they need to come find their roots? It's being made to feel less than. And so, you know, with From Pasta to Pigfoot, we start with Faye in a relationship with a black guy in London, and he's making her feel culturally stupid. And he just makes her feel like she knows nothing, and he's so condescending, and she's so desperate to have this boyfriend because, my goodness, did she have to wait a long time to get this boyfriend. So it's like, oh my gosh. And then she just tries too hard and she is messing up left, right, and center, and eventually she gets a chance to go to Ghana. And that's when Faye has to start figuring out who Faye is, not just culturally, but to herself and for herself, and this dual identity that, you know, she has. You know, her best friend is a white Irish girl, English Irish girl she grew up with and from school. You know, she's just lived in this very multicultural, very, you know, multiracial world, and she's grown up in Hampstead. I mean, this was not even like in an area of London where there were a lot of black people around her. She was literally growing up very, very different from her immediate surroundings. So Faye's story was to me, and it was one I finished relatively quickly. My daughter says it's because I was on sick leave with her being pregnant. I had to stay home. She said, yeah, I'm the inspiration for the book. So I wrote that first draft, and then, yeah, thanks to the same daughter, it went into the drawer and it stayed there for a long time.
Right.
But, you know, again, coming back to serious things, the book also, you know, the identity issue. And also when Faye goes to Ghana, we follow her. So she starts going to all these different things, traditional marriage, funeral. She goes to the village. She goes to the castle in Cape Coast, the slave castle, and that's a pretty poignant chapter. But all of this is really helping to figure out who she is. And so by the time that book came to an end, it took a long time to get back to it. I kept coming back occasionally, revising it a little bit, put it back in the drawer. And then when we moved back to the UK, again, life and family just consumed everything, and setting up the business and Interims for Development and doing all the other stuff. But I do a lot of nonfiction writing, but I always wanted to get back to that fiction. And so one day I took it out of the drawer, I blew off the dust, and I said, what are you going to do with this?
Okay.
And I started reading it, and I loved the story. And I thought, I don't get to read stories like this anywhere. And maybe there's other people thinking the same thing. And so the quest started, and I was really lucky. I found a publishers called Jacaranda who were all about giving voices to women, Black women, women of other ethnicities whose stories were not being told by mainstream publishers. And so From Pasta to Pigfoot came out, and it was really, really well received. W.H. Smith picked it in their top 25 of summer reads. So
that's incredible.
Yeah, I was walking around the stores. I just kept haunting W.H. Smith to see my book on the shelves. And, saying to people, you're looking for a recommendation? A book over there. My kid be like, Mom, please stop doing this. But, and then I got a 2-book deal for that. So I wrote the sequel,
Okay.
which came out the following year. And Second Helpings is mostly set in London, but she does take a trip to Ghana as well. But it really explored for me the premise that, when you think you sorted everything, when you think you have it sus, when you think you've got it all under control, life will come and show you haven't.
Oh, life will go, let me introduce you to a new level of stuff.
And so our Faye has to figure a new level of stuff. What she wants now is different from the first book. But some of the things that keep her from going for what she wants have not gone away. And she has to figure it out. So those were kind of the first 2 novels. And then there was a gap until Imperfect Arrangements decided to be birthed.
Okay. So we're going to talk some more about your books, but we're just going to look back. We're still in March, International Women's Day, International Women's Month. And for this year, the theme was, equality and all of that good stuff, which is really great on the surface. But can we really be talking about equality if representation is still an underlying issue?
Equality is it's a very nebulous concept, because for me, and I guess with so much of what I do and teach and write, it's all context driven, right? So when I'm coaching sometimes young Black professionals, and I have an issue with the word minority, and I'm like, well, I find that difficult, because minority feels a little bit like less than. It feels a little bit like, you're a bit minor, you're a bit below. And as I say, I really need to just get on a plane for 6 hours and suddenly I'm the majority. So, it's all very context driven, and you've got to really think about what context are you actually using equality in. I mean, if I put myself even in Ghana, is that really equality? How many women have the privileges I do over there? So even as women, we don't have equality with ourselves, never mind equality with men, and so I think, you have to kind of maybe it's too big a word for a global approach. You have to maybe look at your corner that you occupy, and you think, what am I doing about equality in this corner? Whether it's you're raising sons, am I raising them the same way I'm raising my daughters? And it's interesting because I'll just do a quick dive back to the book, looking at the impact of culture. We have a very different culture to how we treat men and expect of men than we do of women, right? And my characters in the novel, who obviously are in Ghana, see this, and it's not fair, it's not right. And so we say that, but as mothers, as women, how many of us are making sure that we raise our boys are making sure that we relate to our men with the full knowledge that we're equal, as opposed to trying to get some peace and letting things slide. And therefore, when they slide and they slide and they slide, and finally you're at the bottom of the slide, you're wondering, how did I get down here, right?
How did I get here? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's somebody shared with me a video about this woman talking about, oh, that it's impossible for a Black man to be monogamous, and it was almost the excuse of it. And I'm like, the way she was talking of men, you will think she was talking of some kind of child who has does not have the moral compass to say, I will make a decision and stick to that decision. And I find that that's how we tend to, treat men, especially African men. And that's the excuse. It's like, well, that's how they behave. And you're like, what are we telling them? And what are we telling our sons, our nephews, our cousins, that is okay to behave in this manner?
Yeah. And, just like a kid will push your buttons and get away with things if you let them, as human beings, that's what we're designed to do. We're designed to push our limits, right? And we only stop when we get burnt or when something happens that tells us we need to go no further. Or, you risk losing something. And if that thing that you risk losing, whether it's a toy when you're a kid, whether it's your mobile phone when you're a teenager, or whether it's your spouse or your partner when you're an adult, if that risk is not something that you deem severe enough, then you'll continue doing whatever you need to do. But be warned, there is a risk to everything. Every piece of behavior brings its consequences. And, as a society, we need to make people more conscious of those consequences and follow through those consequences, because sometimes too, we do not do that.
This is true. I mean, every action has an equivalent exchange. If you do something, there's going to be a reaction. That's the principle of life, or should be the principle of life.
Yeah.
So we're talking about skills. When we're talking about International Women's Day, we're talking about women, taking the lead. As a former HR professional, let's dig into that part. Is what do you see as a top 3 skills that stand in the way of women advancing up the leadership ladder?
Oh, wow. I guess one of the things is that internal voice, right? That voice that is, that whole imposter syndrome thing that we read about so much. And it's not confined to women. I have male clients who are at such senior levels, and you really wonder why on earth they have doubts about their ability. So I think it's a human thing. But I think in women, it can become a little bit more crippling. I think also I see a lot of the time, particularly when women are applying for roles or being considered for roles, is they have this idea that unless I've done this thing, I don't know that I can apply for it. Whereas a guy is more likely, I'm generalizing, but is more likely to say, if I know how to do this thing, or I know who to ask in order to get this thing done, I'm going to go for it. So we tend to, I think we believe the instructions, right? When you go somewhere and they give you the instructions, right? You got 10 minutes to say something. And so you in your head internalize, you're a good girl. You take the 10 minutes, you're going to do 10 minutes. You're going to probably finish at 9.5 minutes just to show you really obeyed orders, right? And the guy's going to do 15 minutes and has to be stopped. And even when he's stopped, the person who's stopping him is like smiling and laughing and patting him on the back like it's no big deal, really. So as women, I think we follow rules. We are much more precise. We tend to be more precise, and we tend to believe what we're told to do, right? And so when they say do this and that will happen, we follow those rules. And then we find out that actually the guys weren't doing that. They were just busy playing golf or hanging out at the football match or doing something else. And they got further than we were doing because we were following the rules.
The rules, yes.
So I guess advice number 2 is, the rules are only there as so long as they're useful. If other people are breaking them, you better start looking at what you're doing.
The rules are a guideline and a suggestion.
The game is not played very well when only one person's following the rules, right? It doesn't work, right? Try playing tennis with someone else doing their own thing. Okay, so that's the other thing. I think with women, what is it? Okay, so I think also I have a bit of a bugbear about we have to fix us, because a lot of it is systemic, and however much we fix us, the system is not going to do anything. So I tend to sometimes do the storytelling approach, which is people are sometimes so unconscious of their biases that until you turn that around for them to see how it is happening, for them to see how the system is not supporting what you're trying to do, they don't get it. So you have to show that story, right? I've been watching Noughts and Crosses on TV, and so interesting seeing in this depiction of the society ruled by the black people, and how the white people are the minorities and treated so badly. And it's like that's probably the best way to get somebody who didn't understand their privilege to see what it feels like, because now they're seeing themselves in that other role, whereas
Yeah.
they don't envisage themselves when they're looking at somebody who looks different from them in that role. And so you've got to do that storytelling. You've got to explain how, you know, do you realize that having done this, that, and the other, I've actually exceeded those goals. And I'm looking at what you're doing with some of my peer, and I'm trying to understand how that's working. So from my perspective, can you understand that perhaps it's going to look a little bit strange that I'm not getting that same recognition? And I just kind of wanted us to discuss that. You know, it's very difficult for someone to dispute facts. Well, we know some people in this world who do, but
I was just about to say, you know, there are people
there are
that,
people who do, but for the most part, you know, you're dealing with people who are not unwilling. They simply don't get it. They didn't
yeah,
understand. And so when those people, it's a case of they didn't understand, then you got to explain it to them. Explain it to them in a way they will understand. Tell them like they're an 8-year-old kid. This is what's going on. This is what I'm seeing. This may not be what you intended,
but this is what
this
I'm
is
feeling.
this is what I'm feeling. Let's talk about this. You know, what's happening with this.
I think that's actually very powerful advice, because one, it's identifying that where it hurts you, you have to speak up. It's about understanding those rules are guidelines and sometimes just suggestions. And three, stop engaging with the voices in the head. I call them the chimp committee, because the chimp committee are like the hecklers in
Yeah.
the cheap seats. They
Yeah.
always have something to say,
Yeah.
but they never have anything good.
No. And
Never
they have no
anything good.
solutions either. They just
No,
have.
they just tell you this is the problem and you're the problem,
Yeah.
and is above me now. That's all they're there for. That's all they're there for. And so, you know, the less we engage with them, the better for us, especially as women. And, you know, we're still talking about this whole women and how we gather ourselves in terms of our leadership, how we grow, how we step up.
Mm-hmm.
There's this constant conversation of, let's get that seat at the table. We must have a seat at the table. What does that mean? Because everybody keeps talking about, let's have a seat at this table. Nobody's actually telling anybody, what exactly does having a seat at the table mean? What does it involve?
Mm-hmm.
Where is this table if I don't work a full-time job, if I'm working a job just to support my entrepreneurial business? What does a seat at the table mean?
That's a good question. And I guess it's all about context. I mean, for me, I think it's about having some influence over what you are doing with your life, having some influence about that. And if the influence that you need to have in order to be productive and fulfilled is not available to you, you need to really re-examine the space you're in and find a new space. I set up my business because I couldn't find a job that allowed me to do the things I wanted to do within the role.
Right.
I'd come back from Ghana. I was without question going to be doing something that continued to contribute to my continent and my country. And I couldn't find a job here that allowed me to do that. And so I decided to create the job that I wanted. And so that was why I set up my company, to create a program where I would be tapping into the skills of professionals over here who wanted to go and do something useful with those skills on a short-term basis only, with companies in Ghana and other parts of the African continent, whether it was filling in gaps, whether it was building capability and skills, whether it was undertaking particular projects. And so there was no job called that, right?
Right.
So I had to create it. So I did. And I set up the business. I set up the program. Interims for Development was all about interim managers going to support the development of organizations and people.
Mm-hmm.
And so those projects ranged from training programs to research programs. We had some a women's group in Kenya who were knitters, were knitting locally and were trying to sort of grow their market. And I had
Right.
an interim here who created a new website for them to build their e-commerce. I had another interim who did research on what the toy market was, because they knitted toys, what the toy market
Oh.
trends were. So she was visiting the big stores here, and then she went and
Mm-hmm.
spent a month in Kenya with the group,
Mm-hmm.
looking at their designs for the next year, and that sort of thing. So these were things that people could do with just a small investment of time. The
Mm-hmm.
program paid for them to go, and they had a small stipend, and then the receiving organization took care of their accommodation. So
Okay.
it just opened the door to so many different people, places, organizations, ways in which people could be really creative with how they could provide support. And so I've just done what I do in interview training, say don't talk so much you forget the question. What was your question again?
What does a seat at the table mean?
The
But
seat at the
actually,
table is creating that. It's creating that. I didn't have the seat at the table of influence for what I wanted to do with my life. So I created that seat. And Tyler Perry, you know what? Tyler Perry last year, he just had me standing up and doing a hallelujah, because when he made that speech and he said, when he was trying to break in Hollywood, nobody gave him any space.
yeah.
Nobody gave him any space. And he said, I got tired of fighting for a seat at the table. So I built my own table.
Yes.
And I was like, that's it. Own your stuff. I remember Miss Oprah saying this how many years ago? Own your stuff. And that's why, great as my publishers are, they're still great. I wanted to do my next book myself. I wanted to own my stuff. And so it's been hard work, but you got to do it. So you got to find your seat at your table, whatever your table means to you. And it's usually your life.
Mm. And sometimes you have to craft many tables, and your table is a connection of tables. And I think that's what we forget, that having that seat at the table is not a singular situation. It's a series of tables where you will be the head of one table or join other tables. And I think there's that dialogue that we need to have. So Frances, I think what I'm going to have to do is get you back in for a part 2 of this conversation, because we have been talking and I have so much questions still to ask you. So I think before I let you go, I'm going to ask you just a couple more questions.
Of course.
And then I will let you go, to come back at a later date.
Okay.
So we've talked about your book. We've talked about you being an author. We've talked about how the first book came about. And you have the Imperfect Arrangements being your brand new book. Now, however, I want to talk about the pasta fanatic Faye, who is the lead of Pasta to Pickford, and her obsession with pasta generally, which hence part of the title. What is your food obsession of choice?
Yeah, when people say to me, do you write about yourself? The answer is no, I don't. My characters are never me. But I have to say that is one thing she and I do share. So pasta is one. Jollof rice made by myself.
Okay, so
or by somebody I can trust. Now
okay,
we're not going to get into this. We're not going to get into that. I know where you were going with this.
Yes. So as your nearest neighbor, do you think that the most pointless conversation we can ever have is the jollof rice wars? Do you think that this is the most pointless conversation?
Imagine. I mean, like, we have made this a thing. But, and what makes me laugh is how the Senegalese just like shrug and are like, you people, and the Gambians are just like, you're just talk amongst yourselves, right? Because we know where this came from. So. I
haven't experienced the Senegalese jollof rice nor the Gambian yet. We both know somebody who reps for the Senegalese jollof rice, and she says that lions do not concern themselves with the debates of sheep. And I'm like, so we'll just keep quiet. But I think it's the most pointless thing in the world for us to have my rice is better than yours.
Oh my word. It's so funny though. I mean, it's yeah. And I have one of my best friends is from Sierra Leone, and he thinks he has a stake in this conversation, which makes me laugh. So yeah.
It's like, can all jollof rice not get along? Can we not be represented? Can we not? Can we just all get along?
Oh man, we need a festival where there's no competition. We just all bring our own, right?
Bring our jollof
Yeah.
rice.
No, but food for me is like, I love food. So in my books, it's always, I mean, from pasta to Bigfoot, it's pretty obvious. But it was also a metaphor. You know, the journey from the pasta of the West to the Bigfoot of our African countries. But yeah, there's tons of descriptions of food in there, and in general anyway. So yeah, if you're hungry, you better read that book with caution because you are going to be wishing you were there.
Okay, so a couple more questions. As an author, do you find yourself, looking at books with does your critical eye get in the way of you actually enjoying a good book?
Yes, it does. It does.
So how do you deal with that?
I read books that are well written. No, I mean, I have to be honest, the democratization of writing through Amazon has been amazing. And, that's what's allowed me to take ownership and move forward.
Right.
But it has also created a platform for people who have great ideas, but don't necessarily do the work. And I mentioned right at the start, it's about the craft.
Yeah.
It's a craft. You have to study, not necessarily like academically, but you have to read a lot and you have to practice writing. You cannot just do it, and it doesn't flow if you're not doing it regularly. And if you're not writing and reading in the genre that you're choosing to write in. So what I see, unfortunately, are people who have great ideas. I mean, some of the concepts, the stories I see are amazing, but the execution is a problem. And it's not edited properly, or they don't invest in a good editor. You have to. I mean, I edit my magazine, I edit a lot of other people's stuff.
Right.
I know my limitations when it comes to my own work. You cannot see your own work with those objective eyes you need to see. It's too close to you. So people have to invest in good editors, good typesetting to make it a good visual read, and not have it all crammed up together. And just take the time. Just because you can publish it doesn't mean you should until it's ready, right? So that's what. And so when I'm reading and the words, there's typos and the grammar isn't quite right and the sentence is a little rambly and needs editing, I cannot continue because it really spoils my enjoyment. Really spoils it.
Okay. Well, and that must be people must look at you and go, oh boy, she's about to read someone's book. She's about to.
No, you know what? I everything I do is about building people up. It's encouraging. It's people. I mean, but I'm not doing the right thing by anybody, from my clients to my kids, if I don't tell you how to make it better. It's not with a view to building. I remember when I started my business, and one of my really close friends started hers at the same time, and we would spend a lot of time just going, but what about, and just knocking holes in our business plans, each other's business plans, because that was the way to strengthen it. Yeah. If you can deal and answer with the what about, then you're ready when an investor's asking you that question, rather than trying to flail around at the time trying to figure it out. So people who are good to you and good for you are the ones that are asking those tough questions to really strengthen what you've got and make it better. So when you put it out there, you're really putting out your best stuff. So, you have to give criticisms and take critique. Yeah. Because trust me, I mean, what I ended up with was not what I started with. I had people saying, try this, do that, this is a bit too, this isn't clear. And that was necessary.
Okay. And that's actually powerful. Now, last question. Okay. Actually, I lie, but let's see.
I got nowhere else to go. I'm indoors.
Exactly. I have a captive audience. the insanity of our times. And we've been so good to avoid saying the C word.
The C
We've
word.
been so
Yeah. Because I was told this morning, my friend told me, he said, this too shall pass. And I was like,
yes.
I'm so glad you said that. That's something I say, but I forgot to say it. And
Mm.
it was like, it just made me breathe. And I was like, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
this will pass. We will come out better, hopefully better human beings.
true.
And the people that were hoarding, I hope the food goes bad in your cellar.
Juju. Put the juju X on them.
I didn't just say that. Yes, I did.
I said it.
Because of the hoarders, the madness is escalated.
I said it, No, it's all good. It's all good. I love you people. Yeah.
And yeah, we have nothing but love. We hope you have enough food and everything at home. But the hoarders that are just out of pocket.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
So we know you enjoy reading. We know you, as an author, you've actually gone through the journey of perfecting your craft. And it's never perfect because it's always a learning process.
Exactly.
So looking at everything you do, looking at the fact that you have a multi-layer career, you're professional with your as a CEO and founder, you have the author where you're an author, you coach, you train. How do you balance your life, or is balance an illusion?
Balance is a myth. I have none. I have been asked whether I'm planted in my office chair or whether it's true I have legs and I move. Um, this is the difficulty. When you are doing something that you love, it is so hard to be balanced about it. So I have to get up and look around, because I can sit at my desk writing or reading or whatever for hours and not even notice. I forget, that I haven't done this, or I haven't had a drink for like 5 hours and stuff. It's just crazy because I'm so into the flow. And I wrote an article last month about, the joy and pain of busyness, because it can get to burnout. And, you might think, yeah, I'm having the bull, but one day you sort of wake up and you suddenly think, I can't do this. So I have to be much better at that. And I'm trying. This year was meant to be the year of be good to yourself. And then look what happened. And
well, guess what? You have the time now.
Apparently so, So the be good to yourself was sort of like, yeah, but maybe the second half of the year, after I brought out 2 new novels and got my CBE and done this and done that. But no, I have to I am trying to be better. If nothing else, because I'm aware that I'm modeling, and I don't want, my girls to think this is normal, because it isn't. I mean, I'm just a little bit, OTT, I have to say. So I have to sort of pull back a little bit, be a bit more balanced. It's not easy. It's not easy, because having these different hats, right? If I tell you I have about 9 email accounts that I have to kind of manage for the different parts of the business, doing different things, it's a lot. And so even if you're only looking at them 2-3 times a day, that's like an awful lot of,
That's a lot of time. Yeah.
that's a lot of time. And then there's, things to actually do. And I'm learning the publishing craft of novel publishing as I'm going. And it's, I've had some great help with the team that I put together, but a lot of it is down to me. So I have to sit and read these things and understand them and learn them. So a lot of time goes, and I don't know where the days go. I really don't. But I am trying, and I think it's important, because health is all we've got. And, it's not about taking it for granted and thinking you're a superwoman forever.
I like that. And I like the fact that you say you're not a superwoman forever, but there will be occasions where we'll have to rise up to our superwoman status. And there's occasions where it's okay to lay in bed.
Yeah. And I laid in bed till 9 today. I felt very, very comfortable, I have to say.
So here's my final question, and I promise I'm not going to do a Columbo thing. There's no one more thing.
I love Columbo.
Oh, I still watch the reruns. Columbo is always my top. If you woke up tomorrow morning with everything gone, what would you create?
Do you know, that's such an interesting question, because there's times I sort of think like, so if everything went like all the music that we've known and everything, and
Hmm.
I never remember the lyrics of everything, I'd sit there and have to rewrite some of them. What would I recreate? I would, oh my gosh, I would start recreating everything and anything I could think of.
Mm.
Um, I'd start writing snatches of songs that I remember the lyrics to and trying to finish them off. I'd start trying to recreate my books again. I'd start I'd start recreating my family history. I'd start recreating
Mm.
my dad and his amazing life and career. I'd start, yeah. Oh my gosh, I definitely wouldn't get up from the computer then. I'd be so busy recreating. Okay, now you've got me worried. So now I've got to start thinking of all the things I have to start rewriting all over again. But you know, the thing is, kind of let it all go and just move forward to the future and let the
Mm.
future create the past again, you know? So
Mm.
that might be easier, you know, and just share with people verbally, this is what used to be, and then let the future create the new past again.
Okay. That's a beautiful way of looking at it. That is beautiful. You know what, Frances? I could talk to you for hours,
I
and I think
know.
I've actually proven that I can.
It's been such fun though.
So I cannot wait to get you back when the actual show season comes back, because this is just a special for International Women's Day, and I wanted to
Hmm.
honor a woman that I thought was making such an impact in the world
Oh,
that we live
thank
in,
you.
and I picked you. So I'm very, very humble and grateful that you could join me today. And I'm looking forward to having you back. And also, hopefully, when the corona is lifted, I can meet you and give you a hug,
Oh,
not a
for
virtual
sure.
hug,
For
an
sure.
actual proper hug, because you sound like an incredible woman.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I have had such fun. It's been so nice to meet you and to talk
Same
to you,
here.
and I feel like we've known each other forever. And so, yeah, call me anytime. I'll be
I
there.
would do. Thank
I'll
you,
be
thank
there.
you, thank you. Awesome. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a wrap. If you have any questions from Frances, you know what you need to do. Drop us a message. Her website and details are going to be on the page. You can find out more about her. So, this is going to go on IGTV. It's also going to be on the Shine Out Loud website. And if you have questions for her, drop her a message, connect with her and on her social media. Again, it's going to be below. All her links are going to be below. So, let's find out more about her books. So we're home now for a while. Let's read her books, because I'm actually going to go and buy, from pasta to Pickfoot, because I need to understand what Faye's motivation was,
Uh-huh.
and how it went. So once again, thank you, Frances, for joining us. And guys, the season is going to be starting soon. I'll keep you posted with all the dates. So thank you so much. Bye.